President Roosevelt and his party arrive at Chestertown, Maryland, aboard the yacht Sequoia. Arriving at the dock, they are greeted by their host, Mr. Hiram Brown. Going to the campus of historic Washington College, President Roosevelt and other distinguished guests attend the inauguration of Gilbert Wilcox Mead as president of the college, with a formal notification made by the chairman of the Board of Visitors and Governors, Hiram S. Brown.
On behalf of the Board of Visitors and Governors of Washington College, I extend a hearty welcome to our distinguished guests who have honored us today by their presence at this ceremony, including particularly the President of the United States and Mrs. Roosevelt, and the Governor of the State of Maryland. Board of Visitors and Governors of Washington College faced the task of selecting a new president who, by birth, education, and experience, was qualified to lead this institution along the path blazed by its founders over a century and a half ago. After investigating the records of over 30 different prospects in the educational field, and after having interviewed a large number of them, we have found a man who we believe possesses the necessary qualifications. Gilbert Wilcox Mead. I now, as chairman of the Board of Visitors and Governors of Washington College, declare in this public and formal way that by the action of that board, you have become the 19th president of Washington College, with all the powers and duties pertaining to that office. And in that capacity, I present you to the faculty and students of Washington College and to our honored guests.
Mr. President of the Board, honored guests, friends, in assuming the duties of leadership in this venerable institution, it is fitting that I recall certain words spoken of this college by our first great patron. In a letter written shortly after he had received from this college the degree of Doctor of Laws, President George Washington wrote, "Among the numerous blessings which are attendant upon peace, and as one whose consequences are of the most important and extensive kind, may be reckoned the prosperity of our colleges and seminaries of learning. As in civilized societies, the welfare of the state and the happiness of the people are advanced or retarded in proportion as the morals and education of the youth are attended to, I cannot forbear on this occasion to express the satisfaction which I feel on seeing the increase of our seminaries of learning throughout this extensive country, and the general wish which seems to prevail for establishing and maintaining these valuable institutions."
As most of you already know, Washington College and this community have been honored only once before in the history of the United States by a visit from the President of the Republic. On the first occasion, the honor was bestowed upon us by the first President of the United States. Today, we are similarly honored by a visit of his illustrious successor, the 32nd President of the United States, who occupies on this platform a chair which belonged to George Washington and stood in Mount Vernon. Now, therefore, by virtue of the authority vested by the state of Maryland in the Board of Visitors and Governors of Washington College, and by them delegated to me, I hereby confer upon you, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the degree of Doctor of Laws, honoris causa, with all the rights and privileges thereto appertaining.
Chairman Brown, President Mead, Governor Ritchie, friends of Washington College. I do not think either that it would be appropriate or that I could say anything that would be adequate after the very splendid words which you have heard from the new president of Washington College. He has spoken as the new head of a living college to living men and women. He has spoken of today, and he has spoken of tomorrow. And yet, in coming here, I cannot help but feel the past. I cannot help a very close relationship with the early days of the Republic as I stand here, the second president of the United States to come to Washington College. After a period, after an elapse of a century and a half, that both in wealth and education, there is representation only of a minority of the people. And therefore, as he went on to say, the wider that we can have a distribution of wealth in the proper sense of that term, the more we can make it possible for every man, woman, and child, every family throughout the land to have the necessities for themselves in such shape that they do not have to lie awake nights wondering where the food for the morrow will come from, then we will have the kind of security that means so much to the progress and the safety of a country. And in the same way, if we could provide in this nation for an adequate education for everybody, then again the security of the country would be vastly safeguarded. It is in this spirit that we encourage and foster the institutions of education throughout the land. It is in this spirit that we are seeking today, in times of depression, to prevent further attacks on our educational system. It is in this spirit that we believe in building up the possibilities for education for every boy and every girl. Because in the last analysis, people who have had a chance to look not just at the history of things in the past, but to look also to the application of that history to the problems of the moment and of the future. It is that thought, that objective, that leads us to encourage the ideal of education in the broader sense. There is a tendency, of course, to lose sight of the forest for the trees. There is, of course, a tendency to magnify, today as always, the machinery, the little changes which are stressed unduly, and to forget the principles. Every man and woman with education has a twofold duty. The first is to apply that education intelligently to the problems of the moment and the problems of the future. And the second is to obtain and maintain contact with and understanding of the views of the average citizen of their own country. We have accomplished much, my friends. I think a great deal in the last few months, but at the same time, we cannot attain the goal within the few months. Some countries which have what I believe are known as dictatorships have laid down 5-year programs and 4-year programs and 10-year programs. I believe that in this country, which has not got a dictatorship, we can move further towards our goal in a shorter space of time without giving it a definite number of years. So in the years to come, not just during the life of an immediate program, but all my life, I shall continue to watch Washington College, its president, its faculty, and its students, and its graduates, with the feeling that I am one of them, that I have been very greatly honored in being made an alumnus of the college. And I breathe to you the same prayer that George Washington gave to the college nearly a century and a half ago, that the creator of the universe will look down on this college, give it his benediction, and help it to prosper. And so let me tell you very simply and from the bottom of my heart that I am very proud to have come here today, very proud of the honor that has been conferred upon me, and that I wish you all Godspeed in the years to come.
After the ceremonies, Mr. Brown entertained the president and his party at luncheon.
Look at this. This is cute.
Virtue of the authority vested in the Board of Visitors and Governors by the state of Maryland, and by them and me, I take great pleasure in conferring upon you, General George Washington, illustrious soldier and statesman, on this date, June 24, 1789, the honorary degree of Doctor of Laws in Washington College, with all the rights and privileges thereunto appertaining.
I thank you, Mr. President, for this great honor which you have conferred upon me, and I can only wish continued prosperity for this institution, as well as for your honored self.
The privilege today of celebrating the 150th birthday of Washington College at Chestertown on the eastern shore of Maryland. This college was chartered in 1782 at the end of the American Revolution, when American boys were no longer welcome at English colleges. George Washington became interested in the young college through his friend Dr. William Smith. He gave the first money for its support. He permitted the college to use his name. He served on the first board of governors. He attended commencement here in 1784, and he received from the college in 1789 the honorary degree of Doctor of Laws. It is a happy coincidence, therefore, that this institution's 150th birthday anniversary falls in the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. Washington College graduates have played an important role, not only in the life of Maryland, but elsewhere. Its alumni include 2 governors of this state, members of the United States Senate, congressmen, bishops of the Protestant Episcopal and Methodist Episcopal churches. 1 alumnus served as president of William and Mary College. Others are college presidents, state and county superintendents of schools, college professors, and in whom they have evidenced their continued confidence by electing him to 4 successive terms as the chief executive of the state. Maryland is one of the 4 states of the Union whose bond obligations have the highest investment rating. This is due in no small part to the high class of business ability with which the affairs of the state have been administered under the next Speaker's administration. He has been a staunch advocate of a balanced budget and at the same time a low tax rate. Nevertheless, he has found a place in his budget for adequate appropriations for educational purposes, and all the young men and women who have had the...
Thank you, Colonel Brown, for your very generous presentation of me to this audience in the presence of my friends of both parties. It is an evidence of that very warm friendship of yours, which all of us who are fortunate enough to possess it value and treasure so very highly. Mr. President, distinguished guests, members of the graduating class, ladies and gentlemen, I count it a very high honor to take part in these historic exercises today. Washington College belongs to America. It is the heart and the mind and the soul of our country. And it merits the tributes America is paying it this morning. For 150 years, the influence of this institution has radiated American ideals and American culture throughout the land. Your sons have played a considerable and an honorable part in founding our government. And ever since then, they have played a considerable and an honorable part in developing our government and in preserving and fulfilling its best hopes and aspirations. Now, at such a time as this, there's very real danger. Everyone in authority has the perfectly understandable anxiety and longing to do something to help. And the danger is that the government may too hastily yield to remedies which are panic-born and to experimentations which are too bold and too dangerous. It is not my purpose to discuss this morning any of these specific legislative remedies which are offered to end or to mitigate the crisis which confronts us. All that I wish to do is to sound a note of warning and caution with respect to all of them. A note of warning against the danger of venturing too far afield with experiments alien to American institutions. So I must close. And perhaps the gist of all I have been trying to say is this: do not look to government to do what government cannot do. Do not look to politics to solve what politics cannot solve. The law of supply and demand still works, and the government's experiment with the Farm Board shows that spending federal money or lending it will not stop. $1 billion loaned to veterans on their bonus certificates did not halt the onward whirl of this depression. The issue of $600 million of currency for the Federal Reserve Board to ease the credit situation did not ease it very much. So I end as I began, with an abiding, living belief in the principles of the American government. These principles have shaped our course for almost 150 years. And here, where so many of them were born and conceived and nourished, here whence graduates will go forth to maintain them and preserve them if they are to endure and to survive. Here let me plead with you, let us not sacrifice and let us not impair those sound American institutions. They will, I am confident, suffice to guide us through these troubled seas into waters which at last will be calm again. And with the thinking, believing, fighting faith of a virile America, with the faith that is and always will be America, we will still, under God and under American institutions, fulfill the dream of American democracy.
Authority vested in the Board of Visitors and Governors of Washington College by the state of Maryland, and by them and me, I hereby confer upon you, Friedrich Wilhelm von Prittwitz und Goffern, scholar, man of affairs, editor, distinguished servant of the German Republic, the degree of Doctor of Laws, honoris causa, with all the rights and privileges thereunto appertaining. I shall now proceed with the conferring of the bachelor. Mary Elizabeth Bryce. Robert Lee Carey, Arabelle Cork. Lindley Ewing Cook, cum laude. James Henry Dorsey. David Barr Ford, Jr. Charles Ogden Holland, Jr. Charlotte Carolyn Holloway, cum laude.